Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with the University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a great show for you today. It is the year of the ficus, at least according to the National Gardening Bureau. So we are going to dive into the ficus genus, that is. Oh, and we really bit off a lot more than we can chew, I think. So, I'm not going to do this one by myself. I'm joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, when we talked about doing this, yeah, this shouldn't be too bad. And then
Mhm.
started reading, and it says it's ballooning into a two-parter.
Yeah, it really is. We said ficus the other week, and I thought, oh yeah, that's just the plant in the corner of the waiting room at the dentist office or something. What's there to know? Turns out a lot. It's a big genus, and there's a lot more plants in this genus than that I know about that I did not realize were classified as a ficus tree. Um, so yeah, we're going to dive into it. And I did not realize until really getting into the reading that ficus, another word for it, is fig. So yeah, we're talking about figs today. Um, so that just opens up a whole book of stuff.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And then I've seen the name for our edible figs. It's ficus, but I never put two and two together
Mhm.
until I started reading. And yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, I found a review paper on ficus, and they listed 887 species.
Hmm.
Ficus is one of the bigger genera of plants out there.
And that's quite a few. And so, no, folks, we did not learn all about all 887 species, but there are two that are native to the United States, right, Ken? But not exactly to Illinois. That would be strange if they were. But what two native species would we encounter maybe down in the southern part of the U.S.?
Yes, yeah, there are two. It's southern Florida. So we have the Ficus aurea, or the Florida strangler fig, and then Ficus citrifolia. So it gets the name because the leaves kind of resemble citrus leaves. It's also known as shortleaf fig or wild banyan tree. Again, also native to South Florida. And both of these are strangler figs. So basically, these seeds will land on a tree, palm tree, what have you. Seeds will germinate and they'll grow as an epiphyte. So they're primarily getting their water and the nutrients from the environment. They're not necessarily feeding off plant as a parasite. And they will grow and grow. Eventually, those roots will touch the ground. Then they will start forming stems and trunks, and basically they will strangle and close that tree and kill it. So if you have a really big one, there was probably a tree it was growing on and it killed it and left, and eventually kind of grew into this tree that can be 100 feet tall.
Mhm.
So they can get quite large.
Well, yeah, they can look like an entire forest of trees where it's really just one tree that grew from all of those propagation roots. Are they propagation roots or prop roots? Because I was reading it as propagation roots, but then I'm like, maybe it's like propping the tree up. Maybe I was reading that incorrectly, but it sends down those aerial rootlets, which then root down in the ground. And I thought, oh yeah, of course it's propagation roots. But then I'm like, is it supporting roots? Like prop something up?
Yeah, they usually see it as prop roots.
Hmm.
Yeah, I never thought about
It
it.
is
So
whatever I want it to be.
I say when I was in Florida, I didn't go to South Florida that often, but looking back now, I think you see them. It's not rare to see these two species or other species of ficus growing in South Florida. At the time, I didn't know what I was looking at because it's all these weird tropical plants that someone from Illinois is not necessarily used to, or they're growing them as like like Chef Lyra growing as hedges and stuff, which was kind of weird to see. Um, but yeah, I think you see them looking back. If I'm thinking of the right plants, I think you see them. They're not You see them not as regularly, but you do see them in South Florida. These are other ficus species growing.
Yeah, and I mean, if I look back in my memory, again, I think of ficus as this little house plant in the corner somewhere. Um, but if I go into some of these other larger growing areas, like a large greenhouse, a conservatory, like the Climatron at St. Louis Botanical Garden in Missouri, um, you'll see these exact same ficus, the genus, those houseplants, and they will have these aerial rootlets, these prop roots coming down, um, which yeah, I just thought, well, I'm just not going to get that because I'm growing it in a pot in the corner of the room. But yeah, there's a few other things that come in with that. I think a lot of what I was reading was humidity. Like they really like a decent humid environment, which then allows them to create those aerial rootlets to then grow into these things. So I mean, the summer's one thing in Illinois. We got plenty of humidity that time of year, but right now we are in like, you know, chapped hands, chapped lips time in Illinois. The air's as dry as a bone. So there's no aerial rootlets being produced on my ficus tree, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, a lot of these plants are tropical or subtropical, and I think, and I didn't, when you read about ficus, you read about like different sections, so they're broken up within the genus into these different sections. And I think the strangler figs are one section. I think those have a lot of those prop roots. I don't know if all the others, like our edible fig, is in a different section than that. I don't think they produce. I've never seen aerial roots or anything like that
Hmm.
on them too. So a lot of that could depend on the one, humidity, and two, the just what section they're in. And because I think there's multiple sections. I read much more about the um oh, I'm drawing a blank on the term now, on the classification and stuff than I ever thought I was
Hmm.
going to on these.
Well, we have got some things to dive into, and when we get into this, we're talking everything from trees, shrubs, and vines. I watched a couple of videos on YouTube just to get a bit more familiar with what these plants look like. The vining ones are really neat. They were able to adhere to a lot of like rough surfaces, and you can find them climbing around on all over the place. And a lot of them they're characterized as ficus or fig. Um, a lot of them have a very smooth, shiny leaf surface. But these vining ones, as they new leaves were emerging, there were these beautiful red color of that leaf tissue, and I've grown a few other things. So like my rubber tree, which I used to have for years, that also, as those leaves would first emerge from that tip, were nice, like a really faint red color. Um, some of those vining ones, just the appeal of those leaves were just that color of the new leaves. I thought it was really beautiful, and they're all very glossy, very shiny. And I guess one characteristic that do all ficus have this? I think so. Is that they all have like a stipule on the terminal leaf bud. So that terminal leaf bud is covered by the stipule, and it opens up, and there's this sheath there, and it protects that leaf, and then it persists there at the base of the leaf for a while. So my rubber tree definitely had that. The stipule was definitely a ornamental characteristic, I'll say, and then it would shed the stipule once the leaf was fully emerged, um, and I just pick it up off the ground.
Yeah, I don't know. That's characteristic of all. Yeah, same thing with the other urban
Mhm.
too. We see the same thing. I don't know, reading about it, there are two things I remember that are kind of characteristic. They all have this kind of waxy, or not waxy, white latex, white or yellowish latex that they produce. So if you're pruning them or you damage one, you get all this latex production. And then the flowers are pretty unique. So they're called a zirconium. So basically, it's kind of turned inside out. All the flowers are inside. It's basically kind of a fleshy stem with flowers on the inside of it. And there's a little hole that wasp will go in to pollinate. And it's certain species of wasp. Usually they're species specific. So you have a particular species of wasp that will pollinate a specific species of ficus. But that is a whole nother rabbit hole to go down for another day, because
Part
that could be a
two.
podcast in itself.
Well, yeah, and I saw, the flowers can vary. A lot of times the flowers and then fruit are born in the axil of the leaf, but sometimes, kind of like our red bud, they exhibit cauliflory, where it flowers and fruits on the actual trunk. Similar to our red bud, that also those nice little purple flowers in the spring, and then you get those pods develop on there. So, some depending upon the species, you can get one or the other with our ficus. I personally have never seen a my rubber tree or the weeping ficus or any of the others. I've never seen them flower. Um, so I'm sure they do, and those pictures do exist out there, but I don't have them.
Yeah, from what I've read, it is very not very common to have
Mhm.
your house ficus growing as a houseplant flower. It's again, you never like I say, it's never going to happen, but um, if it does happen, you may want to go buy a lottery ticket, or you're
Yeah.
doing something right.
Hmm. But I guess growing in the wild, in our house, we're keeping this 100-some-foot tree pruned down to what, 10 feet. So it's never going to reach that milestone, maybe that triggers that flowering or fruit production. But in the wild, these are considered kind of a ecologically important species, right, Ken? Like once they get to a mature size, they're productive.
Yeah, especially in tropical areas, a lot of places they're kind of keystone species because with that pollination, because they are specific, you have this one species of wasp, maybe a couple pollinating these plants. They're continuously flowering and fruiting just because you don't want to have a long period with no flowers while your pollinators die. You're not going to reproduce. So they're constantly fruiting, so it's an important food source for a lot of mammals and birds. And there's a lot of other insects and stuff that will feed on the leaves and stuff as well. So a keystone species in a lot of tropical ecosystems. Again,
Hmm.
the plants we're growing as houseplants can grow to be 100 feet tall and live for a very long time.
Yeah. Um, and so as you've seen, folks, that this is a very diverse group of plants found around the world, and now we are about to speak in intense and immense, I will say, generalities of care. Uh, so when we get into taking care of these plants in our homes, I will say, like, a very common joke is, "Sorry, I can't do that. I gotta stay home and take care of my ficus," which is like, if you've ever owned and taken care of a ficus tree, sometimes some of them can be a handful. You look at it wrong and it just drops all of its leaves. But let's talk in some generalities, though, because I'm thinking of the weeping ficus as one of them. But there's, generally speaking, I would say that the ones I have grown have been very sensitive to how much water I give it. It's weird. It's like I've been giving it too much, and other times it's like too little. Sometimes it goes like a whole month without getting water and does perfectly fine. And then, you get in a dry period like we are right now, at least in the interior of our homes, and and the plant really seems to languish. And so one thing you can try is all the little humidity tricks, I think, in this time of year. Putting pebbles in the saucer with rock, grouping your plants together, getting a humidifier nearby. One interesting thing I saw online was somebody took sphagnum moss and they soaked it in a bucket of water, and then they mulched their plants with that sphagnum moss, and it sort of released some of that moisture slowly over the course of a few weeks. So you're not necessarily watering the soil, you're just keeping the top of the soil hydrated, which as it evaporates helps to maybe raise the humidity just a fraction of a percentage, I would suppose, around that plant. But do you have any more humidity tricks, Ken, that I'm not thinking about?
Um, yeah, and if you've got one plant, the tray of water with rocks in it, with water to keep that pot out of the water. It's a lot of reading I've done with ficus, it's that under and over watering. If you've got a
Hmm.
pot and they're sitting in that water, you're going to keep that soil too moist, which can cause leaf drop and stuff. Which is, when you think about tropical trees, usually think about having very wet conditions, but a lot of times water isn't necessarily making it down to the ground. It's getting intercepted up in that tree canopy. So not letting them sit in water. So if you are doing that, that gravel, make sure that's elevated and that water's not up
Yeah.
above, up into the pot, so you're not having this constantly moist growing media.
Hmm. Hmm. And yeah, one of the tricks I think with a lot of house plants is you sort of take them to that edge of like, ooh, not enough water, and then supplying enough. So probably some of the most useful things I've learned when it comes to figuring out if a plant needs water is literally picking up, rocking the pot, picking it up. How does it feel? And that just becomes, as you become more familiar with like if pot is this heavy, if it has a lot of water in it, or if it's too dry. The other thing is just moisture by feel. Stick your finger there in the top of the potting mix. If you can go down about an inch or more, or about an inch, 2 inches, and it feels dry, you need to water. Um, and easier said than done because sometimes these ficus plants can get pretty root bound.
Yeah, so and I think that's one of those things that where you read a lot of times I don't know, they necessarily like it. They can tolerate it. So what you do need to repot them on occasion. Some of them can handle that root bound a little bit better than others. But typically, again, generally speaking, for the ficus, kind of a lighter, faster draining soil is what we're going to be looking for. Again, they don't like sitting in that really that moist soil all the time, let it
Mhm.
dry out and stuff. So, or top dressing. If you got a real big pot, you don't have to repot constantly.
Mhm. Yeah, if you'd be bringing in garden soil and potting that with some of your houseplants, don't the ficus is definitely not going to like that one. Uh, it's too heavy. Needs water to move away from the roots. Needs water, but it doesn't need water to be sitting up against the roots for a prolonged period of time.
And I'll say another thing for ficus, and this is something I need to do to my rubber tree, is occasionally clean the leaves, especially like
Mm,
rubber tree, the ones with the big leaves. I'm pretty sure I could write my name on the leaves right now. So occasionally wiping them off, just all you need is water. You don't need to add any oils or anything like that. It's going to clog the pores and the stomates and all that. So just water. If it's a really big plant, take a shower with it. Some lukewarm water, clean it off. But do that on occasion. You get a lot of that the dust or whatever accumulating on those leaves that reduces the amount of light they can take in, reduces photosynthesis. So
mhm.
add that to your, maybe when you're watering, have a damp rag with you, wipe off the leaves.
Yeah. For the longest time, my rubber plant was here in my office with me and our the cleaning crew that would come in once a week. Um, they just sort of ran like a duster over everything. And I'd be here and I'd talk to them, and they like, oh yeah, we dust your rubber tree all the time because it. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty handy. So I need to bring in more house plants here to get cleaned off. Oh. But they're not hungry plants, I would say. They're not wanting much fertilizer. They're not wanting to be fed nutrients as frequently, especially some of our variegated foliage ones. Because when you have variegated foliage, that means you photosynthesize less, which means you grow slower. Um, Also means you're more susceptible to stress if you can't photosynthesize as much to feed yourself. But that's another thing. Um, but yeah, they're not very demanding when it comes to nutrients. But if you do want to provide some type of supplemental nutrition, it's a really dilute liquid feeding. I would say once a month, but some of the things I read, it was like once a week. I'm like, ooh, that sounds a little rich. Um, but yeah, I would say a dilute liquid feeding once a month. This maybe depends on your growing conditions. If you notice that the plant might be yellowing, nothing else has changed, you just haven't fed it anything, well, maybe up the fertilizer a little bit.
Yeah, kind of on the other end of that, I read some stuff of people only doing it a couple times a year,
Hmm.
fertilizing. So you kind of get the whole game with that. And typically, like most house plants, usually you're not doing a whole lot of fertilizing in the winter. This time of year, it's cooler, not as much light, so they're not growing as much. So it's typically that active growing is when you're
Yeah.
going to be adding that fertilizer. So spring, summer, especially if you take them outside, um, and they're getting more light than they typically would indoors, that may be a good time if you think they need it to add that fertilizer. But again, yeah, that's just
Mhm.
the dilute.
Or, or just add Compost. Mix that in with your potting mix when you repot it. That's one thing. Um, the other item that I know people ask me about, what do I do when my plant gets too big for any kind of, like, I can barely move this thing. How am I going to get this out of a pot and repot it? Or they don't sell pots that big, uh, not at least within my budget. Um, I recall, so when I did an internship at Missouri Botanical Garden, if anyone's ever been there for their Christmas show, I don't know if they still do because, mind you, this was over 20 years ago, but um, they, they have this huge warehousey like space, and there are these gigantic fig trees, ficus trees, the weeping ones that I mean they're humongous. They're in pots the size of my desk. My arms don't even go as wide as the pots were, and they're on these massive rollers. And it was so neat to be able to push these things kind of around the room and rearrange your forest around you. But that was where they would set up their annual Christmas or holiday show. And I recall, like, well, how do you can't repot that thing? I mean, maybe they can because it's the botanical garden, but you get a big plant. What are you supposed to do, Ken? When you is there anything you can do for those large trees?
I'll say again, I think as a general rule, ficus can be pruned and handle pruning fairly well. So that would be something you could look at is pruning at least top growth and root growth too, to make it a little bit smaller to fit into those areas a little better.
Or just build an addition to your house just for
Yeah,
your
greenhouse,
ficus. Yeah.
greenhouse edition.
Which we all should have. I think we all need one of those. Make it normal to have a greenhouse on your home. Everybody, let's do it.
Keep telling my wife we need to, but so far
Hmm.
she hasn't gone for it.
Forget the kitchen. We're putting a greenhouse in.
Can cook in the greenhouse.
Yeah. There you go. You can. And sweat with your food. Um, well, all right. Well, I think we covered some of the general questions people might have when dealing with their particular ficus. But we do have we want to dive into some of these more specific ones on there. I think this is a list. We didn't go through all of them because again, 887 is a lot. But the National Gardening Bureau did have a list of mostly common ones. I think we went through there. We're like, I don't know if a couple of these are very common, but um, we went through the mostly common ones. So I suppose, Ken, um, should we dive into these more specific species of ficus?
I think we should. And I'd say a caveat to the more common. Just remember we live in West Central Illinois.
Hmm.
So, if you're in Chicago, larger population areas, it may be a little easier to find some of the ones that we don't see very often. We'll add that caveat
Yeah.
in there.
If you have the Banyan Cafe in downtown Chicago and you can go get all the ficus species down there, tell me where to find you. I'll meet you there. Just got to take a train. Well, Ken, you want to start us off? I think on one of the more common ones out there, the weeping ficus.
Yes. Yeah. So we've mentioned or hinted at this one a little bit. So ficus, benjamina, weeping fig, weeping ficus, whatever we want to call it. So this one is native to Southeast Asia, Australia. So again, more of a tropical climate than we would have here in Illinois. So with this growing in the wild, 40, 50 feet tall, 25 to 30 foot spread. So again, decent sized tree. And typically when we're growing this indoors, we're growing this 2, 3 feet tall, maybe 10 feet tall, depending how tall your ceilings are and all that. So we're keeping this significantly smaller than it would be growing in the wild in the ground. It's like bright, indirect, kind of sunny locations. Can also do shadier conditions. This is the one where I think a lot of times people have all of a sudden the leaves drop. And so this one is kind of sensitive to changing conditions. So light intensity drops. You have it outside, you bring it inside, drop the leaves, put new ones on. Your watering changes, drop the leaves, put new ones on. So this one maybe a little more finicky than some of the others, but yeah, this is the one where, yeah, I think The Office the office plant that you see a lot of times, whether real or fake, would be the weeping fig.
Yeah. I I have a specific memory of childhood with this one. So I remember being in my German class, and our teacher had a potted weeping fig in the corner, and it was infested in whiteflies. And if you, it was like a gag prank for someone to walk by the plant, and any hapless student sitting next to it, you would shake it, and these whiteflies would just mercilessly kind of fly all over the person sitting by it. Um, and in reading this, where these things grow out, like in Florida, whitefly are a major issue with these plants. And so that just, when I read that, it triggered that memory of childhood sitting in German class, and getting attacked by whitefly.
And so these have kind of oval shaped green leaves. There are variegated cultivars
Hmm.
that are out there. I don't know if we're necessarily going to go through cultivar names because there's a lot out there and it constantly changes and who knows what's available now and then. But there are multiple cultivars of weeping fig that are available in the trade.
Hmm. And I'm glad you mentioned, Ken, that this is a very common fake plant as well. It might be the most common one out there that I see.
Don't need to water those.
No, you don't. You still need to dust them though. Oh yeah. I think the weeping fig also has more of that acuminate leaf tip, whereas ones we might look at that might be similar have more of a blunt leaf tip on theirs. So it might be another distinguishing point of it.
So pointy
Pointy.
in layman's terms.
Yeah. Put it in your classroom, folks, and make sure it gets infested with whitefly. Your students will remember it for the rest of their lives, like me. All right. Well, this next one is Ficus elastica, also known as rubber tree. This one is native to Nepal, China, and the Western Malaysia. This is another one that can grow 100 foot tall if you let it. If you grow it inside, you're probably pruning it down max 10 feet, I would say, probably usually between like 2 to 5 feet tall, in your own home. I once propagated this one. It was in down at SIU Carbondale. It was you know horticulture propagation class. This is the one where we propagated this one, and this particular one that we propagated from was growing in a greenhouse in Southern Illinois. If anybody knows about Southern Illinois, it's hot. It is very hot, and if you're a plant growing in a greenhouse down there, you got to be tough. This plant sort of just overtook the entire like the half of this greenhouse. Um, and I think they relied on students coming in to take cuttings of this plant to control its size. Um, and so, yeah, repeated cuttings, this plant, but it was happy as could be, um, growing in the full blazing sun. I had my rubber tree. I killed it last year on purpose. I got tired of it. I was one of those, okay, I've hauled you around for 2 decades. I propagated it. I actually gave it away to people, which is so it is still growing somewhere else in other people's homes. But the main one I did let go of. Um, and so, but yeah, long lived, tough plant. It has these really long, elongated, stiff leaves. Something you can fan someone with on a hot day. I think the leaves can vary in colors. Ken mentioned with the weeping one that they can have variegation, they can have different colors. The one I had was mostly like a bright green, but depending upon the age of the leaf, as we kind of mentioned before, you can have like a really dark green, sometimes tinted with some like pink, purple, or maroon colors. And then, of course, the stipules also add a little bit more color and decorative value, I think, indoors. True to its name, it is called the rubber tree or rubber plant. It does produce that milky sap in excess, I would say, more than any other of these plants that we're discussing today. So this is the one, I recall like if someone would like brush up against my plant and it would snap a leaf, you don't notice it right away, and then later that day, like, why is the floor all sticky? It's because it'll drip sap all over the floor. And this, true to its name, it would be a natural rubber material. It is latex, like a natural latex material. It was once used, I think, to make natural rubbers. It is no longer used to do that. There is another tree, Hevenia brasiliensis, something like that. That is it's in the Euphorbiaceae family. So think back to poinsettias. Poinsettias, when you break their leaves off, they also produce that sap. So this euphorbia, that is the one that is commercially used to make natural rubber materials. But there's also synthetic rubber materials that are probably more commonly out there. So anyway, the Ficus elastica, the rubber tree, is no longer used for any commercial production of this. Um, Now, I mentioned that this plant that I propagated from was growing in the full blazing sun of a greenhouse. Um, I really think it just adapts sort of to wherever you put it. So the leaves will adapt to maybe a more intense sunshine if that's where you have it. It'll develop maybe a thicker, waxier cuticle to survive those more intense light conditions. But generally speaking, with our rubber trees, like all our others, it really likes kind of a partial to low light, maybe not necessarily very direct light setting in your home. Somewhat dry soil. I kept mine fairly dry, I'll say, on purpose, forgetting to water it most of the time. But and it tolerated me for years, but relatively high humidity, I would say, and don't put them outside on a day like today when it's 20 degrees out. So you'll see active growth of this plant if you're 55 degrees or warmer. Um, yeah, just watch your watering. Don't overwater it.
So we've got a rubber tree. It's my wife's. I don't know when she got it. She's had it for a long time. It's one of the ones that's got the darker green, almost black
Hmm.
leaves on it. It's one it got rather leggy at one point, so we hacked it back down kind of to the nodes, try to get some more branching on it. Somewhat successful doing that. We hacked back on it pretty good, and it came back just fine. So
Yeah.
you can we can abuse it to some
Hmm.
extent.
Yeah. And one of the main reasons why I got rid of mine, other than I was getting big, too big, is that I had pruned it and I probably was a little too aggressive. And the plant was fine, but it responded and it was just ugly. The growth form, I was just like, what did I do? I screwed it up. So don't blame the plant. It was me and my pruning. Um, so I salvaged what I could. Like I said, took cuttings, gave them away to people, and yeah, got rid of it.
All right. So next one on our list is Ficus lyrata or fiddle leaf fig. So this one is native to Africa, Western and Central Africa. Again, the tropical band. They're in Africa. Another big one, 60 to 100 feet tall, when grown, in outdoor native conditions. Again, here as a house plant at 2 to 10 feet tall, depending on how big or small you want to make it. It's got these large, really broad, lyre shaped. So the instrument, thus the scientific name, leaves on it. They're green, maybe 18 inches long. So again, even bigger than our rubber plant or rubber tree leaves on this one. Now, I think this is another one that you see um, in office settings somewhat regularly. And again, and rubber tree too, another popular fake plant, plastic plant, or whatever, silk plant, whatever they're made out of nowadays. Um, I personally have not grown this one. I've seen them being grown, but I've not grown this one. I think the rubber tree is the only ficus I have knowingly grown. There may be others through the years that I didn't know what I was growing, but this one is another. It can take that bright indirect light, partial shade if you're growing it outdoors. Again, a lot of times when we're growing houseplants outside, they may be able to take full sun, but when we're growing them inside for most of the year, then bringing them out, they're not going to be able to handle that full sun. So typically we're doing that in partial shade just so we don't burn up the leaves when we move them out. And then when we bring them in, if we're growing them in full sun, they're not going to be very happy and drop everything. So we kind of try to keep those conditions consistent, that sun intensity. Again, like the others, well drained soils, maybe a little more acidic soils. They may like so maybe a little more of a peat based potting mix for something like that. And again, another one that don't overwater. They can cause some leaf drop and some issues with the plants if you are a little heavy handed on your watering. I don't know if this one, if you can find, if there's any variegated ones out there. I probably imagine there probably are. And I
I
think there's
think so.
some dwarf forms that stay smaller, have smaller leaves as well. So again, kind of a wide variety of cultivar sizes, shapes, colors that you can find out there.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, most of these are pretty oval shaped leaves. This particular one has a much more undulations in the edge of the leaf. All right. Well, our next one is one I never thought of as a houseplant. Because to me, it's more of like an iconic, like tropical type tree. It's Ficus benghalensis or benghalensis. It's the banyan tree. I think another is a synonym for this, the Audrey, Ficus Audrey. Is that what that was?
Yeah, I think yeah. When you see it as a house plant, I think a lot of times it's Ficus Audrey.
Yeah, yeah. Um, this is like I said, kind of this like iconic tree. It is the national tree of India. It's native to India, Pakistan, Eastern Himalayas, Nepal, Sri Lanka. It's one of the world's largest trees. Again, where you're like, a house plant, really? But yeah, the Ficus Audrey. That's what you would look for if you were shopping for this at a store online. And it's really based upon that canopy size. So this is one of those trees that starts as an epiphyte in a different tree, sends down those area rootlets, those and forms those prop uh, roots, trunks, and this then just expands, strangles that host tree that it began on. Some of these trees can be thousands of years old. It looks like you're walking into a forest when you are actually just walking underneath one tree that is just spanning over several square feet, hundreds of square feet. So it's a really neat tree. When people think of the banyan tree, I think there's a lot of images that come to mind, and yeah, but yeah, you can maintain this particular one as a house plant. I think it looks a lot like rubber tree though. At least the leaves do. Oval shaped, dark green, glossy. They do have like their their venation of their leaves. There can be some color there too that might make it help stand out slightly different, slightly more than the rubber tree. And so but again, to me, this looks just like a larger version of the rubber tree. It's really neat when it's grown out, nice smooth gray bark. And yeah, I think it's a really neat tree. I think it's more noted for the abundance of those arrow rootlets that it sends down to the ground. Um, but if you are growing this one inside, you're looking for, like a lot of these others, bright, indirect light, moist, well-drained soil. It's going to be a good potting mix that you're going to want to invest in for this. Possibly mix it with perlite for better drainage, with a neutral pH. It does prefer warmer temperatures, so between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, um, and keep it away. If you have a door that you open frequently that's going to be drafty, or near the heat register, you kind of want to protect it from those drafts or any sudden temperature changes that that tree might experience. So maybe a more central location in your house. And again, humidity level 50 to 80% is what it likes. So yeah, maybe we need to invest in a whole house humidifier, Ken. I don't know. That might be something to look into.
And maybe stop those bloody noses too.
Yes, it would. Yeah. I have seen we had one master gardener that we went to their house for a meeting, and they had an atrium in the middle of their house, and they had a banyan tree in their atrium. I'm like, that's cool. And the atrium spanned two stories, the first and second story.
Hmm.
Like, man, one day, I'll have my own atrium, the banyan tree.
Those lottery tickets.
Just keep buying them.
And I will say this one, in some parts of the world, I think, what was it, Australia, the Bahamas, it is considered an invasive species. So not nowhere
Yeah.
in the U.S. I thought maybe Florida, but looks like it's not terribly common in Florida. So it's not, at least as of, what did it say, January 20th, 2026, not invasive in the U.S. anywhere.
Would it be naturalized? Like, does it kind of grow though in Florida? One of these,
Yes.
one of these is a
Yeah.
naturalized species, so they don't like it, but it's there, like dandelions.
Yes. Yeah, I think it can grow there. It does grow there, but from what I've seen, doing a little looking at it, it's not terribly widespread.
Hmm.
So not causing
Yeah.
issues as of now.
And I guess maybe not in the house, but again, growing wild, this thing does fruit. So it does have these, starts out as like these yellowish orange fruit, and these develop in the leaf axils of the tree, and then they kind of mature into a reddish purple. And so, yeah, neat plant. I'll get an atrium one day, and I'll start growing it myself.
Yeah, we did find a document from University of Florida
Hmm.
Ficus trees and vine of Florida that we can link to that covers a lot of these species we're going to talk about. But this is pictures of them growing outdoors to their full size in Florida. So
Yeah.
may I think I'm editing this week. I'll try to find pictures to throw in um, while we're discussing these. But if not,
Mhm.
we'll link to that, and you can see full size pictures. See your houseplants in their full glory.
Yes, it's like, wow, they can do that. I'm kind of jealous. I remarked to Ken as we were looking through this document, like, these are beautiful trees. So uh, take a road trip.
Yes. We got lots of road trips planned here.
So many. More than we can afford.
Time for a sabbatical.
Those don't exist anymore.
All right. Our next one here is Ficus maclellandii. I don't know. It's a nice thing about these
Mhm.
scientific names. Nobody knows how to say them.
Yeah.
So this is the banana slash longleaf fig or Ficus Alli, as was what you see typically again in the houseplant trade is Ficus Alli for this one. Native to India, Southeast Asia, China, that part of the world. Again, we're typically growing these houseplants 6, 10 feet tall, give or take. This one has kind of long, narrow lance-shaped leaves, so a little bit different look and texture than a lot of these other ficus, which have much more broad leaves compared to this one, at least the ones we've talked about. Now, a little interesting history on this one I found. This is from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. I think that's what bbg.org is.
Hmm.
So this was in the 18 or 1980s. This was introduced into kind of the houseplant trade by two different companies. So the Craft Gardens Incorporated and Aloha Foliage. So Craft Gardens gave it the name of banana leaf fig, whereas Aloha Foliage called it and got a trademark for Ali, which should be spelled ALI apostrophe I, which is Hawaiian for royalty. So again, Ficus Alli is what we see typically. So that's how we got to them, and it's kind of a little bit kind of similar to the Ficus benjamini, the weeping fig. Leaves are a little bit different, but it's a little more durable compared to that one. So that may be, if you kind of like that look, this may be one to look at if you want one that's not quite as finicky. Maybe it's kind of got more willow-like foliage compared to broader. So
Yeah, I remember seeing this one in like malls and stuff when I was growing up. I recall this one clearly. You had your fountains going over here, and you had a little atrium area planted with this um, kind of willow-like weeping, appearing fig. Um, yeah, and I do remember I once competed in a national competition for interior design. Um, I'll just say I was on the team for SIU Carbondale. They had no one to do it. I did it. I remember this plant on that list that they supplied, and I had no idea what it was. Being an Illinois person, like no clue. Let's just put all this somewhere. Um, so yeah, got 14th place in the country. So
Hey, good job.
I think it was out of like 25 people, so not that impressive.
Well, that's better than 14.
I guess so. All right. Well, this next one that we're going to talk about is Ficus microcarpa. So when you see micro, you always know like in your head small. So this one is known as the Chinese banyan or Indian laurel. The one name I see recurring though is like Ginseng ficus. Um, and that micro again is kind of sends off a little alarm bell in your head. What does that mean, micro? Well, if you want to get into bonsai, this is the plant for you. This is a really good intro plant for bonsai because it really does tolerate more heavy pruning, tightly clipped habit. Um, and it has these like thicker, darker leaves to it. They're only 3 to 5 inches, oval shape, just kind of like with the rubber tree and the other banyan tree that we talked about. The bark is grayish to white, and you can just prune this into just this little beautiful little micro bonsai. Um, uh, and so, yeah, it's uh, uh, just because the leaves are a little bit smaller, it can handle that effect. I will say, miniature tree effect. Now, in the wild, though, it's going to grow 40 foot tall or more, and has been used historically as a street tree. The aerial roots, it still does produce those. They can send down the roots and damage things like sidewalks, driveways, even roadways. So you're going to have to manage these. And so, in a lot of cases where they have been planted as street trees, people have to come by and prune off all of the aerial rootlets or the prop uh, roots that show up, and just to keep it from becoming an issue. And this is the one I think that has naturalized in Florida. And I don't know if they've deemed it officially invasive, but it is considered invasive in a lot of other countries around the world. And yeah, I think this is the one that when I was reading this publication out of Florida, it said, "Be a good neighbor. Don't plant this on the property line because it will spread out with those aerial rootlets." So yeah, if you live in a place where you can plant these outside, don't put them on the edge of your property line.
And I think this one too, the leaves, like they grow closer together, which gives you a little
Hmm.
more full look, which is good for that bonsai.
Hmm.
Or how you properly say that. Um,
I I was told it is bone, like the bone in your arm, and sigh, like the action that we do when we're frustrated or tired or ready for the podcast to be over. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm having a great time talking ficus. So
that's the listeners right now.
I just heard a sigh go out across the state of Illinois. I wish everyone in the state of Illinois listened to us. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would.
Yeah,
Someday we'll get there.
I conquer the world.
Maybe.
Mm. Yep.
All right, we had one last on our list for the, I guess, I don't know, a little more easy to find ficus that are out there, at least in our opinions, anyway. So this is Ficus pumila, creeping fig. So this is another Asian species. So again, China, Japan, Taiwan, Southeast Asia area. This one creeping, so it can grow as a vine. So you can get 8 to 15 feet long, 3 to 6 foot wide spread. And it's kind of similar to English ivy, where it's climbing and it's supporting itself by those short roots as it's attaching itself to whatever it's growing on. 1 to 2 inch leaves on it. Typically, you're going to be green. So you're going to be growing this on a vine. You can grow this, train this up, like those topiary shapes or the plant poles, wooden frames, what have you. Give us something to anchor to. Probably don't want to grow across your walls because when it comes time to move it, you're going to be repainting or replacing drywall potentially. Um, you could also grow it as a ground cover. If you've got a larger pot, put this in there so you can have a bigger ficus tree with your creeping fig, creeping ficus growing across the top of the pot there.
I I will say one neat thing I saw. I don't know if it was this exact species of ficus, but someone had a um, larger of the weeping fig, and then they planted the base with the creeping fig. Um, I think it was creeping fig. It was actually pretty neat um, how they set that all up. But yeah, it it did remind me of English ivy, how it climbed. So it climbs, and then when it grows horizontally, then it sends out its flowers and fruits, and it's like tropical English ivy if I think more about this. Yeah.
Yeah, looking at again that Florida document, which will be in the show notes, they've got some pictures of it. Somebody grew it on their house, and they're what do they say? Pruned close to the wall every other month with a hedge trimmer, so the leaves stay small and don't get big. And looking at those pictures, they got a mature and a newer leaf, and there's pretty big difference between size there. The leaves kind of look a little bit like winter creeper too. Um, so think like the picture they got there. Think of Wrigley Field, the ivy growing out there. It looks very similar to that from a distance.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, well, that is it for our specific profiles on these particular species of fig. Now, everyone's probably yelling at us, Ken. Well, what about Ficus corica, the Mediterranean fig, the one that we like to grow and eat? Um, well, we are working on that one. We thought maybe we need a dedicated entire episode to that one. So I guess if you have any questions or anything to input about that one, something for us to help when we do that show here in a couple weeks. So, yeah, but don't worry, we are working on that particular species for its own standalone show.
Yeah, that care for that one's a little bit different than our
Hmm.
houseplants. And we'll get into more. We'll go down that pollination rabbit hole too
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
for that one.
Ken's chomping at the bit. I can't wait to read more research
I,
papers about fig pollination.
got to untangle it all in my head first.
Hmm. But I guess we can say, like, in terms of how we get more of these plants, there's a few ways to propagate them. If you do have fruit available, well, then you can plant them by seed. You can get seed out of those fruits and you can plant them and get new. I know there's a lot of tissue culture propagation that goes on and like a more controlled lab setting. I've even done leaf cuttings. So you can take a leaf, stick it in soil, and it will produce roots, but you don't have a leaf bud. You have no opportunity for vegetative growth to take place. So essentially, you're going to have a rooted leaf until the leaf dies, and then you're done. So yeah, you do need, if you do a cutting, you're going to need some type of a leaf bud tissue for that to then continue to grow vegetatively. But I'll say the main way that I've propagated them is air layering. Have you ever air layered a ficus, Ken?
We did try doing it with a rubber tree. I think it dried out too much though to
Hmm.
work.
And that is the hard part. So with air layering, you basically create a wound on the plant, very specific wound. I think we cut like strips out, or you can like cut like through it. And then we would douse it with a rooting hormone. And then we would pack sphagnum moss or potting soil, and you wrap that in a saran wrap or in plastic film, cling film. um, But the hard part is keeping it watered because then you got to like open up the plastic wrap and you got to spritz it. You got to keep it watered in order for the roots to then initiate in that wound that you created. Um, and I remember doing that, and that little that little sphagnum moss ball just falling apart a few times when I'd unwrap it and try to give it a little bit of water. So that it is a tough part of that process. But if you get roots in that moss or in that potting soil, you just cut that puppy right below the wound, and then you got a whole tree. And that's what we did down at the greenhouse in Carbondale. We did air layering on all those that rubber tree that was just growing happy as could be in the blazing Carbondale sun.
And now that I think about it, I don't know if we used potting or not potting, rooting hormone either, which could have been
That
part of the
helps.
issue too.
That'll help. I don't think you have to, but I know if you can,
Speeds up the process a little bit.
give those cells a little bit more incentive to switch from a leaf stem cell to a rooting cell.
And if you are going to propagate your plants, make sure there's no plant patent on them so you don't get yourself in trouble. Because you cannot whatever, propagate. You're not supposed to propagate ones that are patented.
And that's what our lawyer said we had to tell you.
And especially don't try to sell them.
No. Yeah. And you know that we don't have lawyers. We can't afford that. Um, just flinging around in the wind here. I guess have we covered it all, Ken?
So I think there was three of the National Garden Bureau, three species that they listed that we can just mention that you may see in the trade.
Mhm.
I'm just going to read what they have. So we got Ficus triangularis. So this one has somewhat triangle shaped leaves on it, so a little bit different look and texture compared to some of the others. Um, so it's not as commonly grown. It's native to Africa, Southern Africa. About 10 feet tall, outdoors in frost-free areas, which we are not. It's about 8 feet tall if you don't prune it. And there are variegated types that are available. Ficus umbellata, the umbrella fig. So there's another one that has really big leaves, 12 inches long and wide. On those, native to Western Africa, you get 40 feet tall in the wild, typically about 4 feet in size indoors. And they say this one's got thinner leaves than a lot of the other ficus, so it's going to be more prone to leaf drop when under stressful conditions, or you're changing from indoor to out, or air's getting drier, whatnot. So that may be something to consider if you do find this one somewhere. And then Ficus vaccinoides. This is another ground cover or climbing vine, similar to creeping fig. Shiny oval leaves, so it's a little bit different look because they're more shiny. Native to Taiwan. Get more than 6 feet tall if not pruned or trained. So a few others that they list. I think there's some others that you may be able to find, but again, not very common. Probably more of a um, collector level if you're going to be growing some of these other ones.
Oh, I didn't. I I don't know. I hopefully you surprised folks with how much there is to know about ficus. Um,
It's
I,
not just that sad plant in the corner.
no, I will say, in my 20s, I took my ficus out to the party. In my 30s, I left my ficus home. I went to the party. Now in my 40s, I'm staying home with my ficus and avoiding the party. So uh, that's the new joke. Yep, staying home with the ficus. Got to take care of it.
Yeah, try that one.
There you go. Let's see if that goes over. Well, that was a lot of great information about a massive genus, 887 species, the year of the ficus, according to the National Gardening Bureau. I learned a lot. Everyone, I hope you learned a lot too. Well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. And Ken, thanks for hanging out with me and learning everything there is to know, well, at least scratching the surface of what you can scratch here about the genus Ficus.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, they're much more common than I realized. There's a lot of things that I've seen that were ficus that I just didn't know it. And now I'll have to go back and see if they actually were. Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. Yes, your old stomping grounds down in Florida. Yeah. And I'll say, National Gardening Bureau, if you are listening, it's unfair to say a plant of the year is ficus when it is in fact a genus of the year. We need to alter our scope here and help us poor little extension podcaster people out.
Yes, well, thank you again, and let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. I believe we got a garden bite in store for you because we have the Everything Local conference next week in Springfield. So, come learn about local food systems, tree fruit systems, production systems, and participate in the Illinois Apple Cider Contest. Ken would love you to do that. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening, or if you watched us on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing.
University of Illinois Extension.